purpose of this really is to make sure that we provide an opportunity for practice managers and administrators to see how the submission of the annual estimate form works on PCSE Online, how straightforward it is to do that. We're also going to touch on the joiners process when a new GP starts at your practice, to make sure that you get contributions initiated as kind of quickly as possible, and also talk about if you need to complete that retrospectively, and also leavers as well, because if you've had a GP who's already left you and you're getting ready to submit the next year's estimate, then you want to make sure that you've been able to remove their association with your practice. Just to reiterate, the 31st of March 24 is the deadline for this 24-25 estimate, because there was a delay in the form being published. I just want to show you the listing screen. So if I go back to when I'd clicked on that estimate button earlier, I had two options. So practice estimate was what we did and went into submit. Practice estimate listing would give you a record of all of the estimates you've submitted through PCSE Online. So that one that I've just submitted, then that tells us that we submitted that 1401, which feels about right. And the effective from date says 31st of March, means the turn of midnight, so 1st of April to 31st of March. So that's what you can click on this to open up the form and see what you've submitted. So that's something that not everybody has noticed, I don't think, that you should also have that listing button. Important to mention, I think, that when you have your own PCSE Online account that you use to log in, you will most likely have various different roles that the user administrator has applied to your account. So when you log in, it's a one login, and you can see all the various different buttons, so that then means that the practice get back what they've overpaid. My user details, I've logged into the PCSE Online system, logged into GP pensions, and I'm just going to click the estimate button. So practice estimate, what you will see now is that you have the option to select the 24-25 year. And what you will see, and some people have pointed out that there are some GPs that they would like to or expecting to see on their estimate who are not there, and we'll come back around that again just to make sure it's clear enough what we need to do if that does happen. But for your GPs, you just like the NHS pensions form itself, then you have the different sections. So you have GP partners, you have salaried GPs, and then you have non-GP partners if you have any in your practice. So the form will populate with the GP details. So if we start with our first GP, then what we're looking at in terms of the key elements that you need to complete, and the only columns that you need to really be concerned about, will be a column that says estimated surgery pensionable income, and then it will be the tier rate income. So there is another column that you can add any other pensionable income into there, but as a practice manager, then it's not particularly expected that you would be privy to that information. So the important thing is that the tier rate that the GP feels is applicable to them for that year is the tier rate that you select, and the estimated income that is going to be earned at your practice. So let's just say doctor number one, we're going to say 50,000, and I should have had the tier rate table at hand to check the correct brackets, but our GP might have a lot of other roles, and they know that they need to be paying a tier or on the highest tier. Now, what you will notice when you go to the 24-25 estimate form is that the tier rates have changed again, or at least they have changed effective from the 1st of April 24. That was as a result of another consultation by Department of Health and Social Care. So you'll find the tier rate table in the NHS Pensions website. So your tier rate, then you select the appropriate option. So there's a reduced number of options now. So let's just say our GP is on 12.5. Doctor number 2, then again, it's just what's the estimated annual income for this doctor, what's the tier rate that we expect for them, and so on and so forth. So all you are doing is working your way down the form, populating with the estimated income for the practice and the tier rate. You work your way down all of those, and then we will go to the submit button. So let's just put some more figures in to here. And the form itself, as you've seen there, it only gives you the option of the tier rates that will exist for 24-25. So there isn't any way that you can put in a tier rate that the system wouldn't be able to accept. Clearly, it just takes some time and care when you're putting the numbers in. I do recall one person last year calling up in a complete panic because they submitted theirs, and I think instead of 25,000, they might have put something like 250,000, or it might even have been another zero onto that. But we were very quickly able to terminate that submission, and they started again. Okay, and then we've got our non-GP partner at the bottom. So again, let's just select whatever tier rate we've got there. So that gives you a total of the estimated pensionable pay for the practice. Now, again, I'm sure that you all know, but what then happens when we've clicked submit on this, the system will automatically calculate and divide the annual pensionable pay by 12, and then it will apply the tier rate that you've selected on a monthly basis to that 1/12 of the income, and that will determine the employee contributions that are taken for your practice for each of the GPs. So divide their pensionable pay by 12, and then it will apply the tier rate that you've selected for that GP. It will also apply the 14.38% to that 1/12 income for the monthly employer contributions. And you'll see when you get your monthly practice statement, you'll see all of your individual GPs listed out. You'll be familiar with that, where you have a section for employee contributions and you have a section for employer contributions. So in terms of actually creating and submitting the estimate form on PCSE Online, then it is just as simple as that. So all we need to do is tick to confirm and then click submit. We get another chance to confirm that we are happy with the submission, and that's it. So that makes its way through the system, and as I say, that's an automated process. It's immediately calculating, it's immediately creating the contribution lines in advance of April payment run coming around, and then May, and then June, and all of the other months after that.
I'm just going to run through a slide to show the GP journey, so then everybody knows when the GP journey needs to be completed and when they can submit an estimate. Okay, so as you can see, this is just a perform list journey. So this would be right from the beginning when a GP would submit their employment change. Now, once that has been submitted to PCSE, we will then either assign it to you guys at the practice, which would then be waiting for details status. Now, if it's a salaried GP, it will just be down to the practice to approve. Now, if it's going to be a principal GP who's going to be a partner at the practice, that will then include the ICB approval because it involves a contract change. So once you receive that approval, it will be the PL practice manager that is got the role in PCSE Online at the practice that will be responsible for actioning that change. Now, once you approve the GP and attach them to the practice, or assign them that they've left the practice, it will then go through to the ICB to complete their approval side of things. Now, once that's happened, it comes back to PCSE, and at this point, that's when you'll be able to complete the joiner form. You'll be able to log into PCSE Online, complete the joiner form, and then that's when obviously you can get your GP assigned to the practice properly, and then you'll be able to see them on your estimates form.
So practice joiner then. Again, we've got a listing button. Just about every functionality really on PCSE Online have a listing button, and that is when you click on that and you just click search, or you can narrow it by date, parameters, etc. Then that will show you all of the submissions for that type of form that you have submitted through PCSE Online. So again, just for anyone who's not aware of that, that's handy to know when you want to look back and check things. Hopefully you will all be familiar with the joiner form itself. We get an option to select whether this is being completed for a GP or a non-GP. So thinking about that scenario with the pharmacist colleague, it would be a non-GP, and all that really happens in terms of the form is that it automatically defaults to the partner income type, because they can't be salaried GP, can they? So that's really the only difference when it comes to the joining screen. What you would be doing is entering for your GP GMC number is an easy identifier, but whichever identifier you want to enter. If we already have them set up with a pension scheme membership number and they've completed that employment change form and you've approved that at the practice, then they will be searchable here or selectable here. The details will auto-populate, and then you're able to select the joining date. So because it's a GP, I need to confirm whether they're salaried or whether they're a partner, and it's really just a radio button, so you can click between the two. Your joining date, now this is really key. So the joining date now, the functionality in PCSE Online was enhanced quite some time ago now to allow you to enter a retrospective joining date that goes back as far as the 1st of April of the previous pension year. So that means where we're sitting at the minute on the 13th of March, if you've got someone who, for whatever reason, started with you even before the 1st of April 23, so they might have started with you in October 22 or something like that, you will be able to enter that joining date. Once we get into April 24, the earliest joining date you'll be able to enter and have the system do all the work for you is the 1st of April 23. So for anyone who might have, a GP that's been kind of lingering there and you've had problems getting them on your estimate last year, then if you complete this joiner form now, enter the date they joined you, then you will just have to be aware that when you get your contractual statements for the following month, then the arrears that are due for the months that they've worked for you bring up to date, they will be deducted in the next monthly contractual statement, and then after that it will be 1 month at a time, as you would expect. So that's something to bear in mind, but that joining date can be as far back as the 1st of April of the previous pension year. Your selections for your tier rates, the joiner form will be updated from the 1st of April 24 with the new tier rate table, but at the moment we're still in 2023-24, so we've still got the tier rate selections that you will be familiar with from this year, so 5.1% up to 13.5%. So we've got just some simple data to key in. One is the joining date, whether they're partnered or salaried, we need to select that. The tier rate, we need to select the tier rate that we're expecting the GP or to apply to the GP, and then we're entering the pensionable income for the GP. Now, that also here you see that there is a button or a box to enter any estimated solo income, but once again you don't need to worry too much about that. The key thing is that you reflect the GP's expected total pensionable pay in terms of the tier rate that you select, as we said earlier on, just the same as you would with the estimate form. And then once you have entered all of that information, then you can just click tick to confirm and click submit. That comes straight through to PCSE, and as I say, the calculations in the system are automated, and so they will be applied on a going forward basis, but in terms of determining the monthly contributions. But if you've entered a date up there that is a retrospective date, 9 times out of 10 it probably is at least a little bit retrospective, then the system is programmed to calculate those contributions and bring them up to date. So I hope that helps you in terms of the joiner form itself. The difference for the non-GP, you won't have a GMC number to enter as an identifier, but you can use the SD number. You can try searching by name, but that tends to be a bit slower. But the SD number or the GMC number, if they're not being found when you try and enter the SD number here, it means one of two things. Double check that the user administrator has assigned that PCSE online role before you go to do this, because they need to have done that in advance. And then when you go into the joiner form, if that non-GP partner that you've entered the SD number for, if the system's not finding them, it means you need to give us a call and get that added in. That's a one-off thing. Once that's done, then anything else you need to do in future, be it joiners, leavers, estimate forms for that particular colleague, you won't have any issues with that. So that hopefully gives you a bit of a flavour of the joiner form. The leaver, very, very straightforward in terms of just entering the GP or the non-GP partner and entering the leaver date, and that will then stop the deduction straight away, and the system will also calculate any backdated refund this time. So it might be that the GP actually left you in October last year. You put that date in today, and you'll find that in your next monthly contractual statement, you'll see a refund of the months that have been deducted between October and now during the year if there's a change. So there is also a salary change form that you can complete for salaried GPs if you have a partner who has a change in the estimated income. Then you can complete a revised estimate and submit that. The changes will be effective from the next monthly pay run, so it will do a recalculation for you and apply, again based on the tier rate that you've selected, it will apply the new pensionable pay figure and to the calculation. So it's really straightforward. I think there's some questions about what do we need to put in column B. I've mentioned that when we were looking at the screen there, that we don't need to put anything into that column. The system is programmed to reflect the fact that GPs may have multiple roles, and so it doesn't look at it and say, hang on Katrina, you've selected 12.5% tier rate there and that GP you've said is only earning £15,000. It doesn't validate that, because the system's programmed to know that the GP that I'm entering this estimate for might have 2 or 3 different practices that they work at. They could do some solo work, they might do some locum work. So the tier rate that they are expecting, that their contributions, or the tier rate bracket that they're expecting the pensionable pay to come into for the year is 12.5. So it's something that you would check with your individual GPs just to make sure, if particularly if the salary that they're earning from your practice doesn't take them into that top band, then if they have other roles, then get them to tell you what they are expecting the tier rate to be, because then that means that you've got a much more accurate monthly deduction coming off. And as we said earlier, that's absolutely critical to avoiding large adjustments when the GP submits their end of year form. Because if you think about it, if you just create that estimate and say, well, they're only earning 15,000 from here, so that would come into the lowest tier bracket, and you select that and the monthly deductions come off at that 5.2, is it, for 24-25. And if that GP ends up earning 100,000 through all of the different roles they have, and when they do submit that annual pensionable certificate, then the calculation is such that those contributions should have been paid on 12.5, and then you would then see the adjustment after the end of year forms being submitted to bring those contributions up to what they should have been. So if you can have that conversation up front with the GPs to establish what tier rate they expect to come out at, we all know that some things might change for some people, but if you do that, then that puts you in a much better place when it comes to the end of year. Okay, things from Becky, who says that she's been trying to add a salaried GP onto PCSE Online and it won't let her. So I presume, Becky, this is you trying to complete the joiner form to join them to your practice to start pension contributions. But in that scenario, if you find that they're not on your list of people that you can select, or you put their GMC number in and they're not coming up on your screen, then what that tends to mean is that they haven't done the performer list step of the process. So before a practice can complete the joiner form to start pension contributions, the GP themselves needs to log into PCSE Online, go to their performer record or performer list button, it looks like on the screen, and they need to submit or complete an employment change form to say they've started at your practice and what date they started at. Now, the user in your practice who has the performer list approval role will then need to log in and confirm that change. So from the GP's performer record point of view, confirm that they have started at the practice on that date. And then as it stands at the moment, these two processes are separate. So you then would be able to go to that pensions joiner screen and enter the GP's GMC number again. You will then be able to submit the details of their estimated income and tier rate so that pension contributions can be started. If it's now, a few months after they've actually began at the practice, don't panic about that. You can put a retrospective date into that, and then what will happen is in your next contractual statement, if this is sort of 3 or 4 months after the GP actually started, if you say put a date of 1st of November 23 in a joiner form today, then in your next monthly contractual statement you will see an adjustment that brings that GP's pension contributions up to date. Now, the only time that where the GP has completed that performer list step, the approvals have been done, and you still find that you can't enter their GMC number, you can't find them on the pensions joiner screen, the only time that would happen is if they're a recently qualified GP and it's potential that their SD number, their pension scheme membership number, hasn't yet been added to the PCSE system. So that GP will have had a pension scheme membership number created by NHS Pensions when they were a registrar for the registrar contributions, but those contributions are not deducted through the PCSE system, as you probably know. So PCSE at this moment wouldn't have a record of the SD number for that GP, and it wouldn't have been added to their record on our system. So we'll have the GMC number and all of their details in that respect. So if that's the case, so if you check with the GP and you know that you've already approved their employment change, but you then still can't locate them on the joiner screen to start pension contributions, then you need to give our customer service centre a ring. But 99 times out of 100, the GP will already be in the system because they've worked at another practice previous to you, or they may have been locum GP, etc. So we will already have that vital pension scheme membership number in the system. So I think this next question from Shirley is probably very similar. I think Shirley's been trying to add a GP to the estimate form and finding that they're missing, so they're not there. That means that the pensions joiner hasn't been completed for them. So if the performer steps that I've just described have been completed, then if you complete the pensions joiner form to confirm when they started at the practice, then they will appear on future estimates. When you input a new joiner, there's still some issues with the system accepting the SD number. So Simon, as the functionality stands at the moment, as an external system user in a practice, you can't, as you found out, add the SD number yourself if it hasn't been, so you can't add it to the system. So if it's not already in the system, you'll not locate that GP. So in that scenario, you contact your customer service centre, provide them the GP's details and that vital SD number, get that added in at our end, and you would then be good to go in terms of completing your joiner form. We've got a question about, does the estimate only get submitted once a year, or can it be submitted again when you know the estimate's changed? And that's a really, really important question. One of the key points is that it's absolutely critical to keep the estimated contributions as close to reality as you can. And the reason that's crucial is it means that you, as a practice, can avoid large deductions when those GPs submit their end of year forms in the end of year cycle for pensions. So if you know that their estimated income has changed, then yes, as soon as you can, get a revised estimate submitted, and that will take effect from the next period. On the estimate form, it asks for the GP salary 24-25. When does that start, please? So that's a different question to some of the others that have been asked. So this would be the pensionable pay for the pension year 24-25. So that runs from the 1st of April 24 to the 31st of March 25. So hope that's clear. Let's have a look at the GP who has left. So David has asked when a GP who has left a practice and a historic end of year correction needs to be made across multiple practices. How is that managed by PCSE? It seems that a GP practice can be put into the position of needing to chase other practices or providers to resolve. That's not the case, David. So if a GP has left the practice, and so let's say they left the practice this year, but they hadn't ever submitted 2020-21 end of year form when they did work for you, and they're now getting round to it, then if there's an adjustment to be made, as I've just described is quite common, if there's an adjustment to be made, then that's on a practice by practice basis by PCSE. There are situations where some practices have merged with others, and the NHS pensions rules are that if there has been a practice merger, then the practice that remains, the merged practice, if you like, they take on responsibility for all historic pension contributions for the constituent practices pre-merger. So unless it's maybe a sort of situation like that you've had, if a GP has worked at various different practices, then PCSE would be looking at that on a practice by practice basis. Question from Susan about non-GP partners. What do we do with non-GP partners? They don't have a GMC number, as Susan has rightly pointed out, so they don't have a performer record. They don't have that step that says, I need to check that the performer has updated their performer list section on their PCSE online record, because our non-GP partner colleagues don't have that. So there's two things that you need to do. One is, in terms of PCSE online user roles, then you need to make sure the user administrator in the practice has assigned your pharmacist colleague, in this instance, the non-GP partner role on PCSE online. That in itself won't do anything, but they need to have done that first. You then need to make sure that you can find them by their SD number on the joiner screen. If they have never had contributions deducted through PCSE before, you won't. If they've moved, say, from one practice to another as a non-GP partner, they will already have their SD number in the system. But if they haven't, if this is the first time that they're going to have contributions for pension processed through PCSE, then it's a bit like the newly qualified GP. You need to contact our customer service centre, let us know, who that non-GP partner colleague is, what their SD number is, provide their national insurance number as another identifier and date of birth. We'll get that added into the system after checking the NHS pension system. And then when you go to the joiner screen, you will be able to add them. I think, Amanda, you got a question there that's quite a nuanced one about when we submit the estimate of pensionable income, is it whole time pay or the actual sessions that the GP works? So it's the pensionable pay or pensionable profit that you expect them to take home for the year for your surgery. So that will obviously depend on whether they're a partner or a salaried GP, but it's the pensionable pay you expect them to take home for the year that you need to enter into the estimate form. Salaried GP has changed their employment in the performer list, and we have accepted this, but they're still not showing as a practice joiner. So, Tracy, I think the likelihood here is that this is someone who is either fairly recently qualified or who hasn't worked as a GP before, or might have been a locum and never ever pensioned that locum income. But for it's someone who has never had pension contributions processed through PCSE before, no practitioner pension contributions. And so if you contact the customer service centre with their SD number, the pension scheme membership number, we get that added in, you will then be able to see that on your joiner form. I've accidentally entered some income for the surgery incorrectly. I've raised a case. So the best thing for you to do there is to submit a revised estimate and with the correct figures, and then it will stop incorrect amounts being taken going forwards, won't it? And then there'll be that case that you've submitted. When that's picked up, that will be to sort out the adjustment for any of the months the amounts have been taken, assuming they've been taken already. So this is a good question from Anita, because we haven't dealt with this one. A GP who's showing as a partner on the estimate, but they're now salaried, or vice versa, actually. Quite common to get it the other way around. In that instance, what you need to do is you need to go to that pensions space in PCSE Online again and go to both the leaver and the joiner forms. You need to end their association with your practice from a pensions perspective as a GP partner. So you would enter the leaver date of, so let's just say this change happened from the 1st of January. So you would enter the leaver date of the 31st of December 23, and then you would complete a GP joiner form, a pensions joiner form, with the start date of the 1st of January 24 for the salaried role. If it's exactly the same estimated pensionable pay, you're entering the same figure again. Obviously, if that's going to be different, then you would enter whatever the relevant figures are. Now, you will only be able to do that if the GP has also made an employment record update in their PCSE Online performer section again. So there's an employment change type of professional status, I think it's called. So they need to go in and say, I'm no longer a partner, I'm a salaried GP from whatever date it was, 1st of January 24. And when they've done that, you then do the leaver form to end their association with that professional status. So in this instance, they were a partner, weren't they? So we're going to complete that leaver to say this is the date that they ceased to become a partner, and then we're going to complete a pensions joiner to say this is the date that they started their role as a salaried GP. And like I say, that can be exactly the same the other way around. So hopefully that clears that one. If you're having trouble with the actual submit button, just go to the listing screen and see whether or not that has actually gone through. Sometimes the way that it looks on the system, it just changes colour ever so slightly, and you can't always find it always easy to tell whether, when you've clicked submit, something has actually gone through. But that's where the listing screen is always your friend, whether it's a joiner, whether it's an estimate, whatever it is, go to the listing button and you'll see your entry there. If for any reason it hasn't, then if you contact us through the customer service centre, we'd need to get our technical team to look at that, but the functionality, works without any issues. I think someone has pointed out that the fundamental design flaws linking the performers and the pensions processes. So just to mention that, so Janet and I are part of a joint pensions working group to look at improvements from a customer focused perspective, so both from the point of view of the practices themselves and the individual GP pension scheme members. And one of the areas that we're working on at the moment is to see whether we can get this whole thing streamlined so that there's less steps and there's not, the kind of same interdependencies. If you think about it, if you've been around for a few years, you'll know that the performer list side of PCSE Online went live least 2, maybe 3 years before the pensions side of things. So the processes at the time were historically were linked in a way in the old paper sort of routes that things were submitted. And so they were sort of mirrored, I guess, in the new world. But when you take a step back, then there's definitely room for improvement there. So watch this space on that. That's something that we're looking to improve. Just something to reiterate for anybody who does, notice that they've keyed an estimate and then go to the listing screen and you check and somebody's put 250,000 instead of 25,000, just immediately resubmit another one, and that will immediately correct that. The worst you would have is the day before you noted, 1 day before you noticed it. But because it will apply in the following payment run, then if you submit an estimate one day and then later on that day you realise that you've made an error, immediately resubmit another one. That's the beauty of doing it all on PCSE Online, and that will do that automatic correction. So I hope it has been helpful. We're more than happy to run more sessions for practice managers and administrators. If there's any particular topics that you would like to cover, we'll go through these questions